Disability Rights Initiative Program, DRIP.
Disability persons is in different categories, and persons living with disability have different needs from society to function optimally. Accessibility is beyond just construction of physical infrastructure, such as ramps, but the removal of barriers to access in the physical environment, as well as information and communication in different aspects. Accessibility becomes pivotal in inclusion, and failure will make it difficult for people with disability to function on an equal basis with others in society. On account, our focus is understanding disability and accessibility. And my guest is FAECARE Andrew Essien, founder of FAECARE. And she's here to discuss all that surrounds disability, laws, rights, and accessibility, and all that you have concerning disabled people. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, and hello everyone.
Thank you. I am Diba Barry Siedoma Wekeyo, and welcome to Encounter on NT Port Harcourt Network Center. So how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic.
I can see that.
Spectacular and every other thing. Yes, please.
That's a good one. So as I said, we're talking about understanding disability and accessibility of disabled people. Can you just give us a brief of that thing called disability, because people have different notions and all that about what disability is. So can you just give us a brief, just briefly?
Okay, thank you very much. So when it comes to disability and its related issues, there are many parts of it, and focusing for us on this particular project is accessibility. But to understand disability, like I had expressed in the last episode, is not just about an obvious or impairment as people would think it is, but whether impairment, be it physical, be it sensory, that is visual or hearing, be it speech, be it psychosocial, whether impairment and how that impairment interacts with the environment in allowing or not allowing that person with disabilities to assess anything on an equal basis with others is where we begin to talk about disability. And that's why we say that disability and the disabling process is different for different persons based on these interactions. So whenever you think and you want to understand disability, do not just stop at, oh, the person cannot walk, or the person cannot this, or the person cannot do this. Think about that person's rights, the person's right in being able to function optimally as others would in society. So
that's a good brief. Then you said 5% that disabled people have 5% of the workforce. They need to, employ at least 5% of the workforce. Do you think that is possible, or it has been implemented, or it happens anywhere? Because I know this discrimination about disabled people. Do you think that has been effected anywhere, that they give them that room to, to become part of the workforce?
So to explain where this is coming from, in the Disability Discrimination Prohibition Act of 2018, one of the stipulations is that when it comes to the right of persons with disabilities in participation and employment, 5% should be what is accrued when there is a vacancy in a public service or the private sector. So that law was set in motion, and since starting in January of 2019, we're 5 years into the law. What's happening is that we're continuing to raise awareness and exercising the rights. So what happens in the disability community is a lot of advocacy. So in creating access to work, decent work for persons with disabilities, we're saying that quota system, which is 5% for persons with disabilities, is something that should be in the consciousness of every employee, irrespective of the sector, whether government, private, or the third sector, the social sector. So that speaks to being intentional about ensuring that persons with disabilities who merit employment get into the system so that they can live independently without being overly dependent on social services or welfare, as it were. So that is a provision in the law, specifically the Disability Prohibition Act of 2018.
And where that is not met, are there penalties when such is not met, or when these people are being disrespected? Are there penalties for such actions from the public?
Yes, there are penalties as stipulated in the law, but currently what we are trying to do, especially as an organization, is to continue to raise awareness, because we have a clause that says ignorance of the law is not an excuse.
Yeah.
So wherever there is active seeking of vacancies, the stipulations are that ensure that you are inclusive in your clause when you are doing a call for the vacancy, to let people know that persons with disabilities can apply. The second is that in your recruitment processes, you ensure that it is inclusive of persons with disabilities, so that and we're not saying employ persons with disabilities because they have disability. The merit allows for quota. Think about this. In pushing for gender rights and gender equity and gender equality, we had what we call the quota system in allowing for representation of women in governance and different aspects. So it's that same quota system that is being employed to just be intentional about having that 5% of persons with disabilities in different sectors of of work.
Talking about barriers now, are there barriers to accessibility? Because we are measuring, maybe we are focusing on accessibility now. So are there barriers to accessibility of those people?
Yes, there are obvious barriers. If it's okay with you, I would like to, because I've explained what disability is. So in expressing what accessibility is for persons with disabilities, accessibility is an English word, but for us, it doesn't just stop at access. It talks about the approach, the entrance and the use of a space or a service or technology available to everyone, and we always use that on an equal basis with others. So accessibility for persons with disabilities is that ability to not just be able to enter, but to be able to approach, access, and use a space. And when we talk about the barriers of accessibility that persons with disabilities face are many, but we've divided them into different sectors. So I'll start with one, environmental barrier to accessibility. So when you speak about the environment, you're speaking about the built or the natural environment. And we're focusing a bit on the built environment, which is the man-made environment. So some of the issues of barrier come when the man-made environment is not built in such a way that a person with disability can access either a physical structure or transportation, something that is made by man. So that's what we need to talk about, environmental barriers. The second barrier is information and communication. Because we are social animals, and nobody is born without that need to communicate or interact with another person. So information barrier would be where there is an information and a person cannot access it because of the format with which it is presented. So for instance, a person who is visually impaired not being able to access information because the format it is presented is not in the format that the person can read or access it. The other one is communication barrier, which has to do with how communication is met. So we're communicating and we're speaking English. If I start speaking my language, we will stop communicating.
Of course.
If we start speaking a language, we will stop communicating. So communication barrier comes where the medium with which communication is being had is not engaging. So for a person who is hearing impaired and the person cannot hear English, and you're not signing or writing, the person loses that information, and there's a barrier to that communication channel. Another one that I like is institutional barrier. Now this one has to do with systems where you put policies in place without consideration of everyone. So somebody will say, for instance, now to access, let's say, flight by air, as a person with disability, you cannot travel alone. The person has said that as a policy. Without any meaning engagement with a person with a disability community to determine the level of independence that persons with disabilities have. And then boxing everyone to have a medical emergency because the person has a physical disability and therefore the person should not be travel unaccompanied. Now that's an instance of an institutional barrier. So you have set a policy that now denies a person access to transport by air because of a policy. carried out by an institution, mostly uninformed. Another one would be, for instance, and sometimes they are just misinformed. You know, they say, okay, you cannot open a bank account without thumbprint. And then we ask simple questions. They have to be alternatives. Because a person who is a double hand amputee without fingerprint and the person, you're saying the person cannot have a bank account. So you see that it's meaningful because you want to have safety, privacy, but at the same time, it's now a policy that is making a barrier to a person to access a service. So sometimes we must consider everyone when we're bringing about all of these policies and things like that. There's another barrier, it's attitudinal barrier, and this one is very pervasive. Because even when there are laws, and a person does not feel inclined to persons with disabilities, that person stands to be a barrier. So for instance, we talked about 5% employment. Now, if you feel that a person with disability can never add value to an organization, you would have that bias in going into that interview in the first place. So if the person is stepping in, you've already adjudged that this person will not bring any value to you. And then you will now interview that person based on that bias. So you've already determined that person cannot work in that company. So attitudinal barrier is very pervasive because it's informed by what we know about disability. And that's why we like programs like this, because they help us to create a lot of awareness around disability. And I always tell people when they listen to me that always check your biases. You may not know that you have them until you find yourself engaging with the person and you will now display. So sometimes check your biases when it's time to engage. This my bias, is it founded on facts? Is it founded on truth? Or is it founded on myths and misconceptions? A person will say you cannot marry a woman with disability because all the children have disability. It's not necessarily a truth. A person will say you cannot touch a person with disability because you feel that disability is contained. That is not the truth. It's a myth. So you must check, and we are adults, we can read, we can get information for ourselves. If you grew up knowing something, you heard everybody say it, you can fact check that it came from, oh, I've always known, it does not mean it's true. Or you hear things like a person with albinism is good for sacrifice and you get plenty money. So, and just, but yes, I've heard that. So you must fact check a lot of things so you can see whether your bias is based on the truth or based on just fabu. And then there's one more barrier to accessibility, and that comes from within. I call it personal barrier. Now, when we engage with persons with disabilities as an organization, FAECARE Foundation, I like to engage with persons with disabilities because the mind is very powerful.
Very strong.
Because even at the end of the day, all the buildings are accessible and all the barriers to accessibility are removed. Accessibility issues are no longer a problem unless a river state becomes the most inclusive state in the world. We pray. Now, as a person with disabilities, if your mind has already told you that you are not deserving of what is being offered, you will not go and engage. You won't. You will not go and want to participate. You will not go and participate in activities. So that is what I call a personal barrier. So there are doors. Doors are meant for accessibility. So for instance, but if you don't walk through a door, you cannot access what's happening in the space. And that comes from fear, self-doubt, a lot of things. So we always encourage ourselves to work on ourselves. First of all, you are a person first. You are living and deserving of every opportunity that you can grab your hands on. So those are some barriers: environmental barrier to accessibility, information and communication barrier to accessibility, attitudinal barrier to accessibility, personal barrier to accessibility, and institutional barriers to accessibility. Thank you.
Accessibility indeed. I was when you mentioned marrying a woman that is disabled and all that, I just thought of something. A man, an able-bodied man, marries a disabled.
No able-bodied.
Sorry, I heard that there are some words that are not supposed to be used.
So what we say when we avoid,
so I don't fall.
We try to avoid words that would shortly suggest something else. And so we use words like persons without disability, person with disability. We try to avoid words like persons living with disability, because disability for some persons can be shortened. Can be shortened. So we use persons with disability. People have different biases about naming And I'm like, just stick with the names. If we change it, it's our name. We will change it and we'll let you know. So not an able-bodied person, but a person without disability
married to a woman with disability, and keeps abusing the woman, and because she's not, able to do certain things for herself, and yet you're married to this woman. In such case, what happens to the woman? What is the woman expected to do?
Okay, so there is gender-based violence with disability. There's also disability-based violence. So gender-based violence will be violence accrued on a person because of the person's gender, whether male or female, actually. And then disability-based violence is violence that is meted on a person because a person has disability. So, for example, disability discrimination is a type of disability-based violence. So a lot of persons with disabilities in the institution of marriage do experience violence in different forms. So one of the things we tell persons, and again, my gender is not just male and female, is that understand that as a person with disabilities, you have what we call increased vulnerability. And as a woman with disability, you have double discrimination by reason of gender interacting with disability. So they come together and they can increase a person's vulnerability. So spousal and intimate partner violence is something that happens a lot. So first of all, in the space of courtship, determine that you're not marrying a person because of pity. Determine that you're marrying a person out of love. Do not determine that you're not marrying a person because of the benefits that come. Maybe because the woman with disability, when people see her, they have empathy and they give her things. We've seen that happen many times. But to answer your question directly, if you are a person with disability and you find yourself in a violent relationship, and you find yourself in a violent marriage, and I said relationship because it doesn't even necessarily have to be married and all that. One of the things that you must understand is that you have access to help, and help can only come if you speak up.
Of course.
If you do not speak up, nobody can really help you. If you feel like you can manage the situation, unfortunately, a lot of times we find people that end up being killed so that the relationship can end. So one of the first things is speak up. In fact, we had a program where we said silence is not golden. Speak up and speak out. You can also report to bodies that can assist you legally. And there are many bodies like that can assist you to legally pursue, depending on what you want. The other thing is that you must know what you want in a relationship, because a lot of times we meet people who are abused but they do not want to leave because of the benefits that they are getting. So you must determine. At the end of the day, it comes with the person experiencing violence in that relationship. So is it happening? It is. But is it possible to get out? Of course.
Okay.
Yes.
And then let me go back to the first question I asked you before we started the program. Talking about projects and programs under your organization. Are there programs and projects you've embarked on to help these people with disability or vulnerable children? Are there either ongoing or the ones you've done in the past? Are there programs like that to to really help them?
So FAECARE Foundation, for the past 10 years of existence, what we did was we ensured that we created our projects and our programs. We lined it along the vulnerable groups that we work with. We work with orphans and vulnerable children, work with persons with disabilities, youth, and the less privileged in society. Now, within those program areas, we have thematic areas, and then we create our projects and programs along thematic areas as well. So this is an example of one of the programs we are doing under our program or project that we call Disability Rights Initiative Project. And we're focusing this particular season on accessibility. So that's why you see me tending to focus on accessibility, because again, when it comes to disability issues, there's so many aspects. So as an organization, disability rights advancement, disability rights awareness is one of the areas that we focus on for persons with disabilities in our programming. We also do empowerment programs and things like that, where we actually empower persons in vocational skills and different things like that. So why we're here is because we're funded by Disability Rights Fund to bring disability rights initiative projects discussing accessibility to the public, raising awareness and advocating for a more inclusive River State. And if you want to know more, of course, our website is there, FAECARE Foundation, and you can check more and engage with us either on disability rights, disability empowerment, or media advocacy, or children empowerment, whichever way. But this one, we're focusing on persons with disabilities, particularly their rights for accessibility.
We'll take a short break now, and when we return, Encounter continues, and FAECARE Andrew is still in the house. Stay tuned.
Accessibility is for all. Make River State accessible for persons with disability. It is possible. This message is brought to you by FAECARE Foundation, supported by Disability Rights Fund.
Welcome back. Encounter is still the program, and FAECARE Andrew Essien is still in the house. Welcome to the concluding segment of the program.
Thank you very much.
Then let's look at like for NTA here we'll have a sign language interpreter on our news every program. So I think we are keyed into all that concerns the disabled people living with disability.
Are we scoring ourselves?
With disability. Seriously.
Yes.
No, I said I'm telling you that in NTA we'll do that. Yes. You watched us. Our news, we have that sign, for those of them that have hearing impairment and all that. So for FAECARE Foundation, you talked about empowerment. What kind of empowerment do you give to this? Is it just awareness and all that?
So like I said, we have different programs that we do in FAECARE Foundation. One of them is this program, which has to do with building the capacity of persons with disabilities to advocate for their rights, bringing information about disability rights to the public.
Okay.
We also have empowerment programs. For example, our Hope Again Initiative program, which this is not about, where we empower persons with disabilities to get skills. We've done many. We've taught them skills, we've taught them business planning, and we've supported businesses of persons with disabilities in the South region. So we do a lot. Again, I'll ask that you refer to our website, and we'll give out contact details on all the things that we do.
Okay.
Thank you.
So what are some of the key concepts related to accessibility?
Okay, thanks. So, like I said, when it comes to accessibility, a lot of people just think of entering. So the first key concept I'll talk about is what we call the universal design. And this is important. Universal design has to do with when you're at the innovative stage of bringing out either a product, or doing a program, or planning a service.
Okay.
So you think about how can I be inclusive in bringing this program to the public. So universal design concept has nothing to do with directly with persons with disability. Is that if a person picks up my product, can the person use it in spite of whether the person is with a disability or not? So for instance, if you have a phone, whether you're a person with disability or not, from the creative stages of smartphones, and it wasn't like that before, anybody can use the phone, including persons with disabilities. Why? Because there are features embedded in that phone that can be activated to make that phone useful to that person. So think about universal design for initial concept. So if I'm building a building, from the time I'm building the building, the making of the architectural drawings, the plans and surveys, is it accessible? So that's the concept of universal design. The second one is reasonable accommodation. And reasonable accommodation has to do with structures that are already existing, and you are modifying it or adjusting it to benefit a person with disability. So the excuse of, it has already been built, it doesn't come up. You can modify it in such a way that the person with disability can access that service or that product. So for instance, this building that NT occupies has been built forever. However, there's a lot that can be done to improve accessibility of the complex or the building. You can build mobile ramps, you can create ramps for people to access doorways and things like that. So that's reasonable accommodation. Now to wrap up key concept, because there are so many other things. But I would like to say that think about accessibility as a continuum, as a flow. Think about the approach, the entrance, usability of the space, and exit. That is accessibility. Because if I enter your facility and I cannot make use of the features of the facility, I have not still had access. If I cannot even approach your facility and you have a ramp somewhere, I can't even get to the ramp, you haven't done very well. So one of the encouragements that I will have, and I'm going to start with NTA because I know that we're rounding up this segment, is this: don't stop at the entryway. Think about the entire facility. I should be able to enter the studio more easier than I'm able to. So think about the use of the facility. Think about accessibility as a continuum from approach, entry, use, and exit. And that is accessibility.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And just finally, just your message to the government, because they have a lot to still do. Organizations, individuals, and just briefly, your final message too.
So the first one I would say is that I'll start, like, charity begins at home. So our NTA has sign language interpretation for news. We can actually have sign language interpretation 24 hours of programming. Okay. It's possible and can be done and should be considered. The second one, I'll speak to government, and I would say government lead the way, lead by example. I speak to the current government who is interested in persons to push for inclusion of persons with disabilities in all areas and in all sectors. Finally, to the individual who is listening to me, we're not pointing fingers, we're speaking to ourselves in the products and the services that you deliver in the public space. Think accessibility and think inclusion. Everyone matters. Thank you.
Wow, that was a good one. Thank you for coming on the program and sharing your thoughts on accessibility and understanding disability.
It's always a pleasure.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. You heard it all. See the person and do not focus on the disability.
Good afternoon. My name is Amina Salahuddin. I am an accessibility rights advocate. My key message is that government should please bring easy access for deaf persons. For example, the sign language interpreters. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Titi Confidence. I'm an accessibility advocate. My message is on employment opportunity for persons with disabilities in Lagos State.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Soriari T. Bennett. I am an accessibility rights advocate. My key message to the government is for them to make sure that they bring public transport for persons with disability. Thank you very much.
My name is Ms. Agatha Wanguma, disability advocate. My business is accessibility. Please grant me access.
My name is Shikine. I am a accessibility rights advocate. My message is to grant people living with disability access to transport.
Hello everyone, my name is Peace. I am an accessibility rights advocate. My key message is that government should provide easy access for persons with disability. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chinwe Achonye. I am an accessibility rights advocate. My message is that government should provide easy access for persons with disability. Example, sign language interpreters. Thank you.
Hello, greetings everyone. My name is Ellen Branate Hayes, and I'm an accessibility advocate. I want you to know that accessibility is meant for everyone, including persons living with disabilities. Thank you.
This program is brought to you by FAECARE Foundation, supported by Disability Rights Fund as part of Disability Rights Initiative Project Accessibility. Disability Rights Initiative Program, promoting and advancing disability rights.